Okay, so I just listened to that Beatles Now and Then thing on streaming. It just dropped just this morning. I listened to it twice so far, and I thought for a future video I would capture my initial thoughts on it. And these are they. Now and Then. It's a good song. It's a good John Lennon song. Good enough of a John Lennon song that I think had he lived longer than he did, he would have eventually put it on one of his own albums. And I think it's a good thing that they were able to preserve it and do the recording that they did. It was a tasteful production, you know. There's a string section, but they didn't go full electric light orchestra. And there's overdubs, but you know, none of it drowns out John's performance. And yeah, it's a good kind of sad, melancholy John Lennon song to cap off the Beatles timeline after 60 years. So yeah, that's my initial thoughts on Now and Then. For more, go to Facebook. There are heated debates over whether the cover art is any good or not. But that I'm gonna get the Blue Album for my copy of that song, so that's irrelevant.
This is indeed a disturbing universe.
Hello, greetings, and welcome. Welcome to the Stereo 999 YouTube channel. I am your host, the artist formerly known as Stereo Steve, and I am waiting for the bus.
Maybe talk about the Beatles or something like that next week. 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 That next week.
All right, let's talk about Beatles compilation albums, because that's what we're talking about. And I'm going to start by talking about the American albums that were released in the 60s. And for those of you who just tuned in the UK were albums like With the Beatles and Beatles for Sale, where in America those were split up into several albums. Did I say With the Beatles? Did I say Meet the Beatles? Well, anyway, in a nutshell, the early American Beatles albums were compilations. And, you know, they could only really put 11 or 12 songs because of the way royalties were paid out in America versus the UK, where the Beatles albums had 14 songs. So they would shave songs off. They would include singles. And so these first few Beatles albums were compilations. Meet the Beatles is the first side of With the Beatles with bonus tracks. I've always been used to like this segue from This Boy into It Won't Be Long. So With the Beatles starting with It Won't Be Long seems jarring to me. But solid collection. And then the Beatles' second album, quote unquote, is the second side of With the Beatles with some bonus singles such as She Loves You, I'll Get You, etc., etc. And then Beatles for Sale. Beatles 65 is side one of Beatles for Sale with some bonus tracks with that reverbed version of I Feel Fine and She's a Woman. And then Beatles number 6 is the second side of Beatles for Sale with bonus tracks, including Bad Boy, which was only on this album at the time. and we will get back to that. And then, of course, you know, when they were starting to get more serious with their albums, and you know, the Yesterday and Today kind of filled the gap. The Yesterday and Today was all the songs that were left off of the American versions of Rubber Soul, Revolver, and Help, plus the Day Tripper single. And yeah, so that's what America got, you know, along with, looks like there's a crease here where somebody tried to check if this was a butcher, and it's not a butcher. But so that's the early phase of Beatles compilations. Now, what about actual authorized greatest hits albums that came out while the Beatles were together? Not counting one that I don't have that was not authorized, there are really just two. And this one, every other country in the world got this except for America. This was a collection of Beatles oldies, and this was contractual. This was released in 1966 for December so they could have an album to sell on Christmas during the long pause between Revolver and Sgt. Pepper. This was, you know, it kind of had the new psychedelic graphic design, and it was kind of getting the fans up to date. And this was where Bad Boy was released in the UK, was on this compilation. Also, the clean version of I Feel Fine sounds really good on this record. That one, and then in about 1970, what's known as the Hey Jude album. And this was an Apple kind of Alan Klein thing. And it collected a bunch of tracks that were only on singles. And the original title was The Beatles Again. And, you know, they just treated it like a compilation. But after this first run, they decided to just title the album Hey Jude, because the song Hey Jude was so huge. And, you know, somebody goes into a record store and says, I want Hey Jude on an album, not just a measly 45 for this 7-minute long song. And they had Hey Jude album. This is the early 80s reissue on the Capitol Purple label. All right, so here's some trivia. So both of these compilation albums, there are two songs that appear on both of these records. Do you know what they are? Well, I'll tell you after the intermission.
Back album. Listen while you can, because if the past is any indication as to the future, and it's the only one we have, we will be in some way stopped from playing this album by the record company itself after the next couple of days. So get it in while you can. It won't be out till Christmas. This is all of side 2 from the Beatles' next album called Get Back. Of the Get Back album. Listen while you can, because if the past is any indication as to the future, and it's the only one we have, we will be in some way stopped from playing this album by the record company itself after the next couple of days. So get it in while you can. It won't be out till Christmas. This is all of side 2 from the Beatles' next album called Get Back.
The two songs that appear on both the collection of Beatles oldies and Hey Jude are Can't Buy Me Love and Paperback Writer. So that brings us to compilation albums that emerged after the Beatles breakup. Now, the story was that there was an unauthorized compilation called Beatles Alpha Omega that was sold on a TV offer. You could mail in and get it. And so Capitol Records or EMI or whoever decided that they were going to release their own Beatles compilations and shut down these other fools. So that's what they did. And they released in 1973 the Red Album and the Blue Album, 62 to 6, and they used, you know, the Get Back photo and the Please Please Me photo. Very good use of these photos. And, you know, if you were a 70s kid, this is where you started with the Beatles. So this is my, this like an OG Apple Red Album. Has the lyrics here. And starts with Love Me Do, ends with Yellow Submarine. And then this is my copy I've had ever since I was like 13 years old of the blue vinyl Blue Album, which if you didn't already know, these colored vinyl Beatles albums, the red and the blue and the white album, were released in 1978 for the 10-year anniversary of the white album. And yeah, it just makes me happy that I still have this. And then the compilations came fast and furious, this rock and roll music, you know, cheesy cover, good tunes. I don't have the love songs compilation because I'm a lonely guy. I don't really have use for that. But, you know, Helter Skelter and I'm Down on the same record. You know, they should have put I'm Down on Hey Jude, but that's another story. So the UK Beatles rarities. I think this was part of a box set. It says sampler album not for sale. Okay, so this was originally part of a box set that had this graphic design. Maybe like 79 or 80. Thinking of giving someone a record as a gift? So yeah, this Beatles rarities, again, this originally was part of a box set of albums, and it was songs that were not on UK albums, like B-sides, like the original version of Across the Universe that was on a compilation album, which I'm not going to show you because I don't have. And yes, it is This Boy. So this is all pretty much B-sides, and then it's got the German Wanna Hold Your Hand and She Loves You, and then the second side's Rain. So it's basically a collection of B-sides. But the same tracks that were rare in the UK were not the same tracks that were rare in America. So the American Rarities album is a totally different animal. They give you a nice butcher shot in the gatefold. But they're actually trying to give like variants of songs. So it's like their Ringo version of Love Me Do, a stereo version of Misery, and There's a Place, also stereo versions, which, you know, and then there's the German She Loves You, and I Love Her off of an imported album that has like an extra guitar piece. It's like this single version of Help, the UK version of I'm Only Sleeping. Penny Lane with the extra horn bit at the end. Helter Skelter mono version that doesn't fade back up. And the original version of Across the Universe and You Know My Name and The Inner Light, I think, that are also on this. And then there were a bunch of compilations of this early stuff with Tony Sheridan with the Ain't She Sweet. But anyway, Beatles compilations. They're compilated. Okay, unboxing of my package that I got just now. Dun, 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 dun. It's the Beatles 62 to 66, 67 to 70. And this is the new remixed, remastered. Because the vinyl versions are like 3 record sets. But I opted for, there we go. Some nice pictures of the lads. And lyrics. That's kind of the same as the original Red album, the lyrics printed on the inside.
Yeah, on the sleeve.
Okay. And yeah, but I was going to say is I opted for the CD because it has the songs in chronological order, where the vinyl version, they just threw the extra songs on a 3rd disc. Okay, and the blue one has, even though it's not from these years, the blue one has the Now and Then, the lost John Lennon song that they reconstructed as the final. That's like, let it be across the universe, I me mine, long and winding road, now and then. It's like a real melancholy ending to this collection with those 5 songs in a row. So yeah, it's got the same thing here. And the 2 CDs in the envelopes. Nice glossy booklet. Okay, this has some story and lyrics and the lads. All right, pop this in my disc changer and listen to it on my stereo, and then I'll talk about what it sounds like. Okay, so what do I think of these things? Yeah, they're cool. They're cool. I like the choice of extra songs. I like the sequencing. There are some great segues. Like on this one, the segue from You Can't Do That into Hard Day's Night. Great segue. And I Want You, She's So Heavy, cutting off and then Let It Be starting is pretty cool. You know? I mean, I know it's not really a Beatles VC video without the host talking about how much better a job he would have done than the people at Apple Records. But nah, these are fine. And I like the sequencing, the CD versions that have the songs in chronological order. And I maintain what was my opinion of the original Red and Blue albums back in the day, which is, if you don't have any Beatles at all in your collection, these guys are the perfect way to start. And it's a good way to get your feet wet with the remixes that have been coming out without having to buy expensive box sets.
Hey, Steve, are you going to talk about the elephant in the room?
Well, there is an elephant in the room. But the elephant in the room is actually the walrus. That's right. I Am the Walrus is the most noticeably different remix on this thing. And it's mixed so differently than the original version of the song that it prompted someone else in the VC to assume that Giles Martin added extra sound effects to the second half of the song. I don't think that's what happened. I think the way that it was mixed, we hear a lot more of the little sneaky sounds where they were kind of buried in distortion on the original version. But there's always been differences between the version on the orange and yellow swirl label 45 and the version on the Magical Mystery Tour LP, especially the stereo version. This is a later pressing on Apple. But the version on the Magical Mystery Tour album is the same version that was on the old Blue album. Okay. Now there is another version of I Am the Walrus on the American Beatles Rarities album. Capitol has created a new version of this song by combining the two rarest versions. Previously, there were at least 3 versions. The shortest one is the most common in the US because it appears on the stereo album. The other 2 versions both have something extra. The Capitol US single has a few extra beats in the middle of the song right after the words "I'm crying," but before the words "yellow matter custard." The stereo version from England has the intro riff repeated 6 times instead of 4. Now, these 2 oddities have been edited together for the first time. It is interesting to note that on every stereo version of this song ever released, the song becomes fake stereo almost exactly 2 minutes into the tune, with the bass on one channel and the highs on the other channel. So yeah, and when there's that radio tuning sound effect, suddenly the song becomes distorted with the fake stereo effect on the original version. Now, what I believe sounds like to my ears is that for the remix, they went back to the multi-track tapes and decided to just forego that distortion effect and play the more psychedelic second half of the song through with the sound effects more clear and undistorted. So you hear the little samples from the radio tuning and stuff. So all those sound effects were already there, but now they don't have the distortion effect, so you can distinguish. That's what's going on this version of I Am the Walrus. Also, for a reference, I want to direct your attention to this bootleg album that I picked up back in the 80s. It's called Strawberry Fields Forever. And besides the song Peace of Mind, which was rumored to be the Beatles, but wasn't actually the Beatles, and What a Shame Mary Jane Had a Pain at the Party, there is a bare bones I Am the Walrus basic track. I think it's on one of the anthologies too, but this is where I have it. Backing tracks and vocals, no studio musician overdubs. So if you want to hear the bare bones without any sound effects, either the anthology or this thing. So yeah, thanks for watching my video, and like and subscribe if you wish. I always say if you're new here, watch some of my other videos because they might be better than this one. And Leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you. Make new parasocial imaginary friends. That's always fun. So yeah, peace, and all you need is love, man.